Good afternoon, everyone. This is Melissa Thomas with Florida National News coming to you with your Tuesday edition of the FNN Politics and Power series. And today we will be interviewing Attorney Belvin Perry Jr., who is, of course, candidate for state attorney for the Ninth Judicial Circuit. So just jumping right into it, just in case the name isn't quite familiar to you, although it's pretty familiar on a national scale at this point, although this was many years ago now. But just to give you guys a brief overview of who former Chief Judge Belvin Perry is and who current Attorney Perry is, just to give you guys a brief bio. He was born to a mom who was a teacher and a father who was in law enforcement, and he was taught to value and protect the integrity of public service. He graduated from Jones High School. Shout out to Jones High School. He earned his bachelor's and master's from Tuskegee University and later got his law degree from the Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Texas. So he began his legal career in the office of the state attorney, actually. So he has a very long history with the office of the state attorney. He quickly rose to the ranks, concluding his service with the prosecutor's office as chief assistant state attorney. Soon after, he actually made history, becoming the first African American to be elected to the circuit bench of the Ninth Circuit without first being appointed. Now, during his 25 years on the bench, he served as administrative judge in Osceola County and served nine terms as chief judge of the Ninth Judicial Circuit. He's best known for his work as presiding judge over the Casey Anthony murder trial. So we'll get into that when we get into the interview. And despite the kind of media circus that it became, news publications did recognize then Judge Perry as, shrewd, sharp, and no nonsense. And, they stated that he emerged as a star during the widely watched trial, despite, or perhaps because of, his seeming disinterest in the cameras that capture the ongoing drama. And, as soon as the court was called to order, he was simply just in control and focused on the case. Now, as chief judge, he managed a budget that was over 20 million, 200 employees, and 65 judges. His success as a leader in the community and as a fair and effective judge in the courtroom earned him multiple honors and accolades, including the Children's Mental Health Champion Award, the NAACP Community Serviceman of the Year, Champion of Justice Award, Orange County Domestic Violence Task Force Award, and many others. Upon his retirement from the bench in 2014, Orange County government renamed the Orange County Central Receiving Center the Belvin Perry Jr. Central Receiving Center in his honor for the work that he did championing for those individuals who enter the criminal justice system that experience mental illness and substance use disorders. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the Honorable Belvin Perry Jr. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of history here, but before we dig into that, I did want to first start out, and I asked all my guests this, like, how have you and your family been during the course of the pandemic? How's everybody's health been? How's everybody been doing?
My family's been blessed. No one in my family, my siblings nor my mom have been afflicted by the dreaded pandemic. What it has caused us is to be cautious as to where we go and how long we stay out. And it has made us homebodies, so to speak. And our outings are quite restrictive now.
Gotcha. And I mean, I'm glad to hear everybody's safe and okay. That's good. That's good. I did, we were talking a little bit off camera about how the pandemic has been affecting, the way you campaign and the way you do your work as an attorney. So kind of share with our audience a little bit about that. Like, how has it impacted you?
Well, number one, all of my hearings now have been virtual. Depositions have been virtual by Zoom. The end result is it has been a cost savings in some respect to clients. There were trips that were planned that were out of state that we were able to successfully take depositions and really not show any effect in terms of getting the information that you needed. The downside to the whole thing is the lack of ability to have jury trials. Our clients need their day in court to get their full recoveries. So consequently, all civil trials have been postponed. And it is my feeling that we're not going to see any civil trials probably until sometime in the spring of 2021.
Wow, that is a while from now. Kind of give us your thoughts also on the process of schools reopening and kind of even from that legal standpoint. The Florida Education Association, had their lawsuit with the state, and then here in Orange County, there was a Orange County Teachers Association that had their injunction. But kind of talk about what your thoughts are on Florida's process of reopening schools in the fall, given the pandemic.
Well, the problem that concerns a lot of individuals is the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know enough about this virus, how this virus is spreaded, and whether or not these precautions that we are taking will keep our children safe. And a lot of people just don't want to gamble with the health of their children.
Mm-hmm.
Secondarily, if children are able to withstand this virus, there's always the possibility that when they go home, it's transferred to their parents or
Mm-hmm.
to their grandparents or to elderly people in the community. So there are some valid concerns, and hopefully the steps that have been taken will mitigate those, but it's just the unknown. And that's what's causing all of the fear, the unknown.
Gotcha, and that does make sense. They actually announced recently with the learning pods now, particularly to help working parents while the students are learning virtually for this week as schools reopen virtually this week. So indeed, definitely agreed on that in terms of the unknowns. And now with the shift, from it being droplets to the possibility of COVID-19 spreading as an aerial virus, if you will. So
Yeah. The key
definitely.
thing with all of this, even with the online learning,
Hmm.
particularly in minority communities where there is a lack of internet and infrastructure, uh, we're going to have to make sure we have the programs in place when this pandemic is over with to do some catch up. Because a lot of our students are going to be behind because they don't have the proper infrastructure to deal with it. And let's face it, face to face learning is the best learning,
Hmm.
as opposed to trying to trust a kid of tender years to watch something over a television screen / a computer and expect them to learn.
Absolutely. And then of course there's the sort of economic benefit, if you will, or the nutritional benefit also of being able to get a meal while, when you go to school, 2 meals a day usually for a lot of the students in underserved communities. So agreed. All right, guys, we're going to take a very brief commercial break and we're going to come back and get into the meat and potatoes, as I always like to say on the show, of Mr. Perry's candidacy. We'll talk about, why he feels he's the best candidate, what his vision for the office is going to be. So stay tuned. We're going to get into all those details.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?
All right, guys, and we are back. Very brief commercial break there. All right, so Mr. Perry, kind of, getting right into it, talk about your vision for the Ninth Judicial Circuit and why you feel you are the best candidate for state attorney.
It has been no secret in this community that the state attorney's office is in chaos. Uh, the turnover rate there is sky high. The morale is low. They've lost the confidence of a number of people in the community, including law enforcement. I have a proven track record of running organizations and running complex organizations that are successful. My record is based upon actual deeds. My record is not based upon rhetoric. And what the state attorney's office needs is a complete overhauling. And we need to bring this community together. We need to bring law enforcement together, because the primary role of the state attorney's office is to keep this community safe. It is to prosecute crimes. It also has the duty to deal with the issue of crime prevention. It also has the duty to lead the effort when people have completed their sentences, making it easier for them to get back into the mainstream of society so they can become productive citizens. We don't want to keep the revolving door where people commit crimes, they do whatever sentence is given to them, and then they're back in that revolving door. It does not.
Gotcha. And thanks for sharing that. We kind of broke up at the very end there, but you're saying it does not, and then it kind of broke off.
It does not serve this community well.
Okay.
One of the things that I will do is totally reorganize the office to make it more effective. Two, a training program to make sure that all the prosecutors know what they're supposed to do. Initiatives in building bridges between law enforcement and the community. If there's no trust with law enforcement, between law enforcement and the community, crimes are not going to be solved. Also, we need to get back to community policing. Yes, there's a disconnect, and we've seen police misconduct far too often. We need to let law enforcement know that, one, that while we support law enforcement, we don't support misconduct. And misconduct will be dealt with. It won't be swept under the rug. Only then, after talking with both sides and getting both sides to understand the necessity that we need law enforcement to do what they need to do, but we also need law enforcement to know that the things that we've seen, like in the George Floyd case, those things are not to be tolerated. We need to also look at the fact that shooting someone, like the incident in Atlanta where the person was actually running away over a drunk driving incident, did not warrant the use of deadly force or any type of force. They had the person's driver's license, they had the individual's car. He wasn't going anywhere that they could not find him. It's just using a common sense approach to keep everybody safe, law enforcement and our citizens.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. Actually, you touched on two different cases that we wanted to talk about, so definitely appreciate that. You mentioned in as part of your platform, in terms of being a bridge between law enforcement and the community. Kind of flesh that out for us. What kind of programs or initiatives would you launch to make that happen, to kind of bridge that gap?
Okay, number one, we got to start a conversation. We got to find out from the community that we serve, and I happen to live in a predominantly African American community. What are their concerns with police? What problems they see from the police department. Secondarily, we have to see what problems the community poses to police. Then, and only then, can we come together and come up with constructive solutions. A lot of things, as my grandmother used to tell me, you can get a lot more with sugar than you can get with salt. So it is how you approach people. We're often afraid of what we don't know. One of the disastrous effects that I've seen happen with police in the community is we don't know them. My dad was a police officer.
Right.
Everybody knew my dad, knew Lieutenant Jones, Officer Kelly. They would actually come to my home to see my dad. We need to get back to the days where we have people policing our community that we know and trust. Once we understand each other and know each other, then a lot of the things that we encounter will be lessened.
Good points. And actually, I've heard stories like that where, police officers were, well known in the community. Folks were comfortable approaching them, and would actually bring issues to them. Would actually, bring any questions that they had, any possible, concerns they had in the community. And at this point, it's kind of polarized to a certain degree, where folks are kind
The
of afraid to
problem is
talk to them.
there's lack of communication. We talk at each other. We don't talk to each other. Once you establish communication and trust, a lot of things can be built upon that foundation.
Absolutely. Now, given your candidacy for state attorney, what are the key accomplishments voters should consider when they're looking at their ballot and deciding between each of the candidates?
One of the things you want to look at is a person's record. Number one, I've been a prosecutor. I've prosecuted every type of case. Number two, does that candidate have successful managerial experience? I've managed the state attorney's office. I've managed the third largest court system. I've also been able to navigate the legislative process in Tallahassee and locally. The next thing you need to look at is this person an innovator? Does the person bring about change? Because change is always the rule of nature. I've been an innovator throughout my career. At the state attorney's office, I started a special unit that prosecuted solely sex-related crimes. I established a process of having children interviewed in special rooms to make them feel comfortable. As a judge, I've started all of the specialty courts, Veterans Court, dealing with mental health, substance abuse. I've done programs with juveniles like restorative justice, sanction to read, and many other programs to not only help people better themselves, but also to try to help stem the tide on recidivism.
Thank you for that. And just as a kind of to play devil's advocate for a minute, for anyone that would be, considering the argument that maybe the state attorney's office may need new blood or someone that's a little bit younger, what would you say to someone like that?
Well, the answer is quite simple. What has the new blood done? What is their record? Ask yourself, over the years that I've been involved in the system, have I brought about change? And the answer is yes. Just recently, I know you're quite familiar with Bethune-Cookman University over in Daytona Beach, Florida. In July of 2019, Bethune-Cookman was facing a $20 million deficit. I took over as chair that January. I was able to lobby the Florida legislature not only to get money from Bethune-Cookman to keep the doors open, but we were able to get money for Florida Memorial and Edward Waters. We got over $30 million for those three schools. So that old blood has the experience and the energy. Anybody that can navigate a Republican-dominated legislature to make the case to educate children from the most deprived backgrounds and communities of this state and nation says a lot about my energy and my vigor. I have a history of doing that. Just follow my record.
Well said. I did want to follow up with what you just mentioned about working with the legislature, because obviously that is something that, the Office of the State Attorney would also be doing. So talk about that history with us for a little bit. Like what were the most effective ways that you saw to be able to kind of win over, if you will, the Republican legislature to the causes that matter most to you?
Okay. I've been working with the Florida legislature since 2000. I lobbied on behalf of the court system the entire 14 years. I was a part of their lobbying team. Even after I retired, I got a bill passed to help first responders that were killed in the line of duty. One of our local deputies was murdered in the line of duty, and his family had no pension. I got a bill passed that benefited him and also benefited the family of Deputy Norm Lewis. So it's no secret that the state attorney's office budget has been cut. It's no secret that in order to have the necessary programs, you got to have someone that the politicians trust, one with a proven track record, and someone that knows how to package things that will meet the test to get funding. I've done that when I got funding for special domestic violence programs that ended the rash of murders of people who got domestic violence injunctions. So I have been very successful in getting programs funded in this state from the Florida legislature, including the funding of the state court system.
Wow. Awesome. And, thank you for sharing that process with us. We appreciate that. Now, before we go to commercial break, guys, of course, for those of you who know, this now former judge, Belvin Perry, over the Casey Anthony trial, I did want to talk to you about that. And, there are a couple of clips that I'll share with you guys while I'm speaking with Mr. Perry here. But I'll start with this first one. I'm going to play this one. This is when you were kind of going back and forth with attorney Jose Baez really quick. So I'm going to play that, and we're going to talk a little bit about, your brand of accountability, particularly while you were presiding in the courtroom. So guys, take a look at this quick clip.
This is what we would do. We would take her direct testimony and we will stop after her direct testimony, but let me make myself plain and clear. If you want files, you better put them in there. I am not stopping any more for you to get a file. As I tried to explain to both sides, you're not sequestered. You go home every evening. These folks are. And as you notice, they wanted to work Memorial Day. For various reasons, y'all did not want to work Memorial Day. So whatever you were doing Memorial Day, they were here, away from their families. I think some of them may have visitation on Sunday, but folks, they are sequestered. I will admit that y'all have done everything possible to make it pleasant for them. But we need to be mindful that they are sequestered and that while we will take as much time as we need to take to try this case, we cannot waste time.
Well said. So talk about the importance of accountability, in your courtroom while you were handling that case, especially considering how very highly visible that was to the media.
Well, in order for a trial to run smoothly, and a trial is a search for the truth, you can't have chaos. When you don't have rules, and when you don't follow those rules, those are all things that lead to chaos and confusion. And my job as a trial judge is to make sure that one, all the rules are followed, and two, that if the rules are broken, there should be consequences.
Mhm.
We all know if there are no consequences for our actions, then there's no need for us to follow the rules. And that sets us apart from everyone else. If we are a civilized society, there should be some consequence for misbehavior.
Absolutely. And how are we able to kind of maintain that clear head and impartiality, especially with some folks kind of objecting to media coverage of that case? I remember there was a quote that I saw where you were saying like, "Hey, this isn't Libya. Like this isn't another country. We have a First Amendment here. We have to allow the media to be able to cover it." But how do you normally kind of balance that?
Well, I think back to the history of this country. And back in the days of the King of England, where people would have trials in secret and nobody would ever know that. The hallmark of our system of justice is the right to a fair and public trial. The reason you have a public trial is to make sure that everything that is done stands the scrutiny of daylight. That's why you have a media. The media is the media. They are the eyes and ears of this community. Some people sometimes refer to the media as the fourth estate. So it is very important that our courts be open, because it's been my experience when you cut off the sunlight, bad things happen.
Right. Gotcha. And then I'm going to play one more clip, guys. And this is a clip of Mr. Perry post-trial. This is several years later, actually, where he talks a little bit about his thoughts on how the case could have turned out differently or what the state could have done differently in the outcome. So take a look at this.
One of the first things, I think more emphasis should have been placed on Casey Anthony's actions the day that the child went missing, the day that the child allegedly died. Another thing that should have occurred was the state should have explained in their closing arguments that if you did not believe that the state had proved the charge of murder in the first degree, that Ms. Anthony was guilty of second-degree murder and or manslaughter. By not making those arguments, the state basically gave the jury a take it or leave it ultimatum. I would take first-degree murder or don't do anything else. So those were two major components that I think they should have emphasized.
Yeah. So yeah, talk a little bit about that. And have you seen other cases kind of wrap up in that same way, like key cases where there was one particular verdict or another that, you know, the defense wanted or the prosecutors wanted, but there was no kind of leeway for the jurors to bring justice, if you will?
You know, the interesting thing about that case, along with other cases, is it's always easy to do the Monday morning quarterback and the what ifs. And we're all guilty of that. But those were the two things that stood out to me. One was, how did she spend her day the day that her child allegedly went missing? And emphasize whether that was normal behavior or abnormal behavior for someone who said their child drowned in a swimming pool and that child was dumped like trash. The other point of that whole thing was you had a young lady, and even though you had a textbook legal theory of murder in the first degree, you never, as our elders would say, put all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. Because reasonable people can disagree. They may not believe it's first degree murder, Maybe believe it's second-degree murder or even manslaughter. So you need to explain to them why, if they don't believe your theory, why you prove these other less included offenses. And for whatever reason, they didn't.
Gotcha. And thank you for breaking that down for us. We appreciate that. In the meantime, guys, we're going to take one more quick commercial break and talk a little bit more about that, the family background. We're going to get into talking about your father and his legacy, especially the history that he made as well. So we'll be right back, guys. Continue to stick around. We're going to have a good interview.
I'm not picking it up. You pick it up.
I'm not picking it up.
Well, somebody's got to pick it up.
I'll pick it up. They're clean. 'Cause my hand is clean. Oh yeah, I'm Charmin clean. That's how I know they're clean.
Charmin Ultra Strong is woven like a washcloth and just cleans better.
Yeah, I'm Charmin clean.
The kid does have a
That's
point.
My hand is clean.
Enjoy the go with Charmin. And for an extra clean finish, try Charmin Flushable Wipes.
All right, guys, welcome back. We are here with Mr. Belvin Perry, who is the candidate for state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit. So, yeah, I did want to get into a little bit more, your father's legacy, particularly, him making history as one of the first African Americans to be hired by OPD and being the first African American plainclothes officer. Kind of talk about what that meant to you personally as his son, kind of seeing that while growing up.
Well, there was a sense of pride, but there was also a sense that you couldn't get away with anything. Everybody knew me. Everybody knew my dad. And so if you did something wrong, you were corrected out there by the community, and then you got corrected at home.
Mm-hmm.
I was very proud of my mom and dad because of the values they instill in us. You got to realize at the time we were raised during the height of segregation. We were raised when you had the white and colored signs.
Mm-hmm.
But our parents instilled in us, despite all the obstacles, we could be whatever we wanted to be as long as we applied ourselves and put forth the best effort we could. And that's what we did. And that was a legacy that they gave us. And they also instilled in us the legacy of giving back to the community. And that's what I've done. I've always enjoyed giving back, and I've continued to do that throughout my life.
And one of the principles that he instilled, from previous articles, I noticed that, he instilled in you the importance of listening. So kind of talk about that and how you were able to kind of take that important skill with you into the courtroom.
Well, you can't hear and you can't comprehend when you're talking. And you can't understand another person's hurt or sorrow unless you listen. When people appear before you, the one thing that they want is to know that you are listening to them. That is their one opportunity. And I've always tried to do that. I was taught that throughout my life. You can't learn if you don't hear. So you have to have that very important skill of listening and comprehending what is being told to you. You can listen, but if you don't comprehend, it's no good.
Right. And that makes sense. Kind of talk about what first inspired you to pursue your law degree, because you had the undergraduate and the master's from Tuskegee. What inspired you to go ahead and head over to Texas to pursue the law degree?
I can recall at age 7 going to court with my dad, city court, where my dad testified. And I can recall watching that white gentleman in a black robe listening as cases were presented, and then imposing a sentence. And there were two things back in the day that I wanted to be,
Mhm.
either a lawyer or a doctor.
Mm.
And there was a thing called analytical chemistry that made me change my mind about the medical aspect of my life. So I was always motivated to pursue law, and that was my end goal. My daddy had two dreams. He wanted two sons, which he had. He wanted in his family a doctor and a lawyer. And in our family, we've had a high school principal, a business owner, two
Mhm.
lawyers, and a doctor. So he was pretty happy along with my mom.
Yeah. That's the abundant life in a way. That's, congrats to the family for sure. Awesome. So you talked a little bit earlier about diversionary programs. Kind of dig a little deeper into that, and what kind of changes you would want to see made to the current status quo. Some things you want to implement once you're in the office.
First of all, we have to start with the proposition that good people make mistakes. And throughout history, we've had good people that have made mistakes. And because they make mistakes, particularly with nonviolent crimes, then while you want consequences, you don't need the consequences dealing with the full-fledged criminal system that gives them that scarlet letter for the rest of their lives. So for minor offenses like first-time petty theft, or in some rare occasions, second time, and that's provided that you're not dealing with somebody that's a professional thief and
Right.
they just happen to get caught that time. But or people who may disorderly conduct and another number of other minor crimes, they can be successfully dealt with a diversionary program. You utilize what I call some community service.
Hmm.
If they have certain issues, you require as a part of the diversion that they get certain type of counseling or education. And then once they successfully complete that diversion, then the charges are dismissed and they have no record. The fallacy is that sometimes when they come back and they sort of offend again, then they're automatically disqualified from the participation in the diversion program instead of looking at the reason why they offended again. In
Hmm.
drug court, people will test positive, but they have graduated sanctions. You don't throw them out of drug court because they test positive, because you know they're going to relapse. So that's why it's important to do a case by case basis. So if you feel there's something that caused them, there may have been a death in the family or some other outside factor that contributed to that conduct, still you want to hold them accountable, but you do a second level of diversion where it's stepped up a little bit more. Maybe there are more hours of community service. Maybe there's more intensive counseling or education. Then that way, good people who do ill-advised things have an opportunity to continue to live their lives, but they pay a penalty, but a different penalty. So that's why I say it is important to be able to have in your arsenal not only the regular criminal justice system, but something that does not leave the permanent stain of being
Right.
involved in the criminal justice system. Of course, we're going to have those among us who commit violent crimes, and we have to deal with that. Of course, we're going to have individuals that are going to want to peddle dangerous drugs, and we have to deal with that. There has to be consequences for that.
Right. For sure. For sure. I wanted to also ask you in terms of, going back to the conversation about working with the legislature, is that in terms of bringing those things to pass, that's pretty much what you would have to go back to in order to make those work, correct? Like basically, going back to having those conversations with state legislators to basically, draft bills or get the funding necessary for those programs to take place?
Yeah, yes and no. For your
Okay.
diversionary programs, you're going to need a lot of help from your local counties. Community service can be worked out with various social service agencies and different agencies in the community. You're just going to need someone to go out, check, and verify to make sure that the community service that you're sending them to,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually doing it.
The
And
verify.
you put them in the right environment. So those are things that really don't cost that much money, except you got to have the infrastructure to do it. It can be monitored by Orange County, or if Orange County or Osceola County is willing to pay for that position for somebody to monitor it, fine. That's not, you don't necessarily need to go to the state legislators to do that. Those are things that the state may consider to be a local option that should be funded locally, that affects the quality of life here. But there are various ways to take care of that. You can apply for grants and things of that nature.
Makes sense. And as we wrap up on this particular subject, kind of talk a little bit more about, your vision even for helping those with mental health issues, because I know that's a cause that you've been working with as well, more so on the youth side, but just kind of talk about what you would want to see, especially with Florida being closer to the bottom in the nation in terms of mental health assistance.
Well, first of all, I also worked on the adult side. One of the things I discovered later on was that we had people that were brought into the system that suffered from mental health and or substance abuse, and a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the jails became the largest mental health provider. And that was not the place. So that's why we created what was known as the Central Receiving Center. Instead of arresting people for minor offenses because they were acting out because of their mental health problems or substance abuse issues, they were taken to the Central Receiving Facility. They were assessed, stabilized, evaluated, and then released for treatment outside of the system. The
Mm-hmm.
missing link, though, was, and has always been the missing link, is that you need more resources out there, and you need case managers to track those individuals. But those were some of the things we did to divert people from the system. And most people don't know, because we didn't publicize it, was we had a strike force where I would be notified by the jail. They would call me and say, Judge, this person has been in here. They've been found incompetent. They are charged with misdemeanors, and we can't release them, but we can't send them to the state hospital. And they were just sitting there.
Wow.
There's 60 days of this, the sentence they could possibly get. I would get together the prosecutor, since I was not the presiding judge, and the defense attorney, and the jail and the various social service people. We would fashion a plan so this person could get out, get treated. And once we put the plan together, the state would drop the charges against this individual, and this person could get out of jail. Those were the sort of things that we did on an as-needed basis to make sure people did not fall through the crack.
Awesome.
And unfortunately, you probably had some that did.
Right. And you basically, as state attorney, you would kind of
Your
do a
mic
little
is
bit more of
off.
that. Oh, my mic is off? You can't hear me? All right, hold on. All right, we're gonna take a quick commercial break, guys. We'll be right back.
Mercury agents everywhere are saving people hundreds and are also there to help save the day.
That was fast. You covered.
Thanks, agents.
Watch out!
That's my car!
Don't worry. We're here to help.
For savings and service above the rest, you can count on Mercury. We're on a mission to save you money.
All right, you got me back now? Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Oh, it still can't? Still can't? All right. All right. Can you hear me now?
All right, now you're loud and clear.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, good old tech issues. It's all good. Always have to adapt. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Appreciate the heads up. So I did want to also ask you, is there a particular case that you've dealt with in the past or something that is kind of top of mind for you that keeps you going, that kind of sets the benchmark for you in your work as an attorney with, Morgan & Morgan, or, back from your time as chief judge, something that keeps you going?
There are a number of other cases, but there's something that occurred when I was first on the bench that sort of awakened me to the extent that we have an obligation to try to help people reintegrate back into society.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a very poor job of that as a community and as a nation. I will never forget, I had a young man appear before me on a drug case. It wasn't his first rodeo. He came in and pled guilty for sale and delivery of cocaine. I sentenced him to a guideline sentence, which his attorney and the state had recommended. He went to prison. 7 months later, he was back and he pled guilty again. And I just simply asked him a question: why were you back?
Mm-hmm.
He looked at me and said, "Judge, this time I tried to do right. I tried to get a job, but I couldn't get a job because of my record. And I got tired of asking my mom, who did domestic work, for money to buy a hamburger from McDonald's. So I took the only job that was available to me, which was selling drugs. And it dawned upon me that if we want to stop this cycle, yes, we punish people for their wrongful acts when it's appropriate. But we have an obligation to make sure that there is an opportunity for those who want to work, that they be able to get a job to make a good living, not a decent living, a good living. We make sure that they get an opportunity to be able to live in a decent neighborhood. And I think if we work on that, and that requires the community to be involved. If we do that and give people not a hand out, but a hand up to reintegrate them back into society, then the number of folks that will reoffend and go back into the system will go down. And let's face reality, government has done a very poor job of reinvesting at that level, at that end. We've always been willing to build more prisons. I'll never forget when we were at jail over crime at the Orange County Jail, and we were on the verge of doing a multi-$100 million expansion. And I created things out there to deal with the jail population, to get the people out who were nonviolent so we could keep that population down. I monitored that every day, and it saved the county hundreds of millions of dollars. But when we save money like that, we need to reinvest it in crime prevention. You know, it's one thing to go into a neighborhood and deal with violent crime. But if we don't deal with the root cause, you're not going to eliminate violent crime totally. But there are a number of people who won't reoffend. Now, there are going to be those among us who we're just going to have to incarcerate. We all know that. But it's a balance. And the prosecutor is in a unique position to lead that, because if you're respected in the community, you are known as fair, firm. People will listen because everybody has the same goal. They want a safe community.
Right.
And we've seen what happens when you don't have a safe community. Look what is going on in Chicago this week. And you have one of those reformist type prosecutors up there. We don't want that here. We want police to be held accountable. We want everybody to be held accountable. We don't want to play favorites, but also we don't want people to rush to judgment and twist facts. We want people to look at the facts and the evidence and rule accordingly, regardless of whether you like a person or dislike a person. People just want fairness.
Right. And to your point that you're mentioning in terms of the law enforcement and things like that, give us your thoughts on the current kind of prevalent thinking in terms of redirecting some of the funding from law enforcement to some community programs or to creating some of the programs that even you've discussed. We're starting to see it in other parts of the country. Seattle, for an example, their council has decided they voted on kind of cutting their police budget. There was a bit of an uproar here in terms of the sheriff's office, requesting roughly $15 million more. There was an activist group that said, we don't want that, like kind of cut some of that and move that towards community programs. Kind of talk about that.
First of all, has any of those people done an analysis of the current budgets? I can tell you this: I'm opposed to to defunding the police to do that. We don't have enough police. When you call the police, you want them to come. Currently now, with the number of officers we have, they react to crime. They're not out there preventing crime. Since tourism has started to slowly come back, there have been a rash of auto burglaries out there on our drive. They're breaking into autos of tourists for practice. Now, I want you to think about this. How long are these tourists going to come to be victimized? So we shouldn't rob the police who are not overly funded. We should find the funds to do that elsewhere. I am totally against defunding the police unless somebody can show me that they are overly funded. And I don't think anybody can do that at this time. And that's one of the reasons we don't have community policing, because they just don't have enough to go around. Call the police and see how long it takes them to get there. When someone is breaking into your home in the dead of night and you're there alone, you don't want to hear that it's going to be 20 minutes before they get there. As the folks say, you want them their PDQ. Pretty darn quick. When someone is vandalizing your property, who are you going to call? Okay, when drug dealers are standing on corners peddling drugs and children are going to school, who are you going to call? Just this week, a young man over in Apopka was shot by a gangbanger in front of City Hall in Apopka. A young man, Mr. Rentz, who had a full scholarship to Louisville, was killed while visiting his grandfather. And no one has been apprehended. So when we start talking about defunding the police, you're playing into the hands of those gangbangers and other folks who will love that, because there will be no one to apprehend them or prevent them from committing crimes. So no, I don't agree with that.
Thanks for sharing your viewpoint on that. Appreciate that. And as we, kind of wrap up the show, I usually ask all the guests this, but obviously in the wake of George Floyd's death, and the use of deadly force there, what are the most effective action steps that regular citizens can do? Obviously a lot of our guests have said, obviously get involved in the voting process. Some of our guests have said, harass your local legislators, make sure that they're aware of what your needs are, what you want in your community. Well, for you, Mr. Perry, what are your thoughts on effective next steps for citizens? What do you think?
The effective next steps dealing in the area of the hot topic is police misconduct. Whenever you see it, report it. There are a number of people who don't report it, because then if you report it, there's a record. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to examine somebody's record to see, because there are indicators that will give us a forecast. Past behavior is predictive of future behavior. So if someone has this pattern, you can stop it before it gets to the point where something happened like George Floyd. The next thing is holding people accountable. When we elect politicians, they make promises to us, but then we don't watch them. We don't do progress reports to find out what they're doing. I in a speech about 3 or 4 years ago, I said, it's far beyond just voting. It's voting and following what they do. We have to have the conversation, but we also have to have some action steps with timelines. People can talk all day long. They can talk about rhetoric. The thing is, what is your record? What have you done? And the only way we keep people accountable is to make sure they do what they say they're going to do. And if we don't do that, then it's on us, not them.
Very well said. All right, guys. In the meantime, we're going to take one last commercial break, and we're going to wrap up with Mr. Perry. Stay tuned.
At Taco John's, you can expect one thing: so good. As in quality ingredients used in tacos and burritos made just for you. Every single bite.
So good.
Expect nothing less at Taco John's.
And we are back for the last few moments of our interview, Mr. Belvin Perry. Mr. Perry, just kind of, share with our audience. I know we talked about a lot of things in this interview, so just wanted to open it up for you to share anything with the audience that we didn't discuss that you feel they need to know.
The state attorney's office for years to come. It is our community, not outsiders, who should determine who our state attorney should be. Look and examine the records. When you compare my record, I have a long history of dedicated service with positive results. I have a record as an innovator. I have a record as being a change agent. And I'm also fiercely independent. I've always been known to call it as I see it. And while I'm respectful of everyone, everybody knows that I will hold everyone accountable, including law enforcement, politicians, or private citizens. But if you want fairness if you want an innovator with a proven record, then I'm your candidate. I'm your best choice for state attorney.
All right. Drop the mic. Thank you very much, Mr. Perry, for joining us on our show. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for your very good and probing questions.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So that does it for this edition, the Tuesday edition of the FNN Politics and Power series. I will be back with you guys on Thursday with, let me bring you guys the lovely flyer to kind of show you who is coming up. We have State Senate candidate Gertie Remy. We'll be talking with her one-on-one Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, today is Tuesday, so you guys will see me again at 5 p.m. Eastern with the evening news rundown. All right. In the meantime, though, thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon. You take care. I will see you at 5 p.m.